have a career in this field, other political factors come into play. Would I hire the person? Could I work with the person? But at the core of it all is really about what are your interesting innovations, what kind of knowledge can you pass on? I think that's still the core of it. And so what I didn't really see is, I saw online advertising, which is enabled basically banner ads. The origination of banner ads, which is then turned into AdSense and Google Words and all of that, it all originated with banner ads on porn sites because they were the only people that had websites worth advertising on. And then from there, just like on Beta versus VHS, the enabling technology sort of started with porn. That enabled the whole starting of cookie tracking of user sessions, aggregation of behavior of online consumers that basically fueled the whole Google model. And I think when people realized that they could generate pure content but get paid for it through ad-supported revenue as opposed to not having to sell anything, I think that was a giant paradigm shift. Now you can just explore pure concept ideas possibly, and if you can attract enough eyeballs, if you can attract enough traffic, you can capitalize on that. You can monetize that. So now it's funny when you talk to people, they're all talking about ways of monetizing their ideas, and there's all these tricks for how do you optimize your site to get better ad clicks or whatever. I think that's now starting to skew things because there's only so many consumers clicking on so many boxes online. At some point,
it's an endless number.
Yeah, I just don't think you can keep supporting it that way forever and ever.
And if you think that when you had your first IBM, that was already running on Windows, I guess, in 94, 95?
No. Oh, well, the first computer was I got in '83 maybe, so it was like DOS 2.1, way before Windows came along.
Right, but it was already Microsoft, one of the first.
No, it was IBM. So IBM PC DOS back then, and I think later on it became MS DOS.
And now people say this is now a big radar for, let's say, what happened the last 20 years, what is going to happen the 5 years. Yeah. I was just listening to people from IBM Research Conference. Why are they, for instance, trying to get Linux better by making research investment? Why do they try to get it protected by protecting it with their intellectual property, all these software patents, tens of thousands, which they used against people rather in the 90s? And even Microsoft having an open source platform and trying to capitalize open source community wisdom and so on. Yeah. And then we have Google, which for you I think is much more interesting in terms of data tracking and all that. So if you just make a quick traveling, how did this Microsoft star rise in your world and maybe come down or stay on the top at this moment, and how about Google? So yeah. Microsoft and Google as two ellipses.
Right, they're two different things. I think Microsoft had some shrewd business in the right place at the right time, and they really capitalized on that and turned it into a monopoly. And I think at some point
during the 90s.
Yeah, and I think some point they stagnated. I think the innovation slowed down. They had a successful business model. It was working very well for them, but they kind of stopped innovating. I think all their energy went into maybe maintaining the monopoly and branching out. And I don't think they were ready for. They missed the web browser. They almost missed the video game console. They turned that one around very successfully. They still don't have very successful mobile. They have a mobile phone platform, but I wouldn't say it's a huge success, usability-wise. And so they're in a lot of fields now, that their search field to compete against Google. But I think I don't think they haven't transformed themselves. Much like Google came along and was sort of like a Web 2.0 type business. They were sort of an iteration. Microsoft had built the platform, and now Google was doing things with what Microsoft had sort of seeded. That Microsoft had not envisioned. And just like people came along with video sharing sites or Wikipedia or all these other enabling technologies that I'm sure somebody at Microsoft conceived of, but they never executed on. And I think right now, they never fully believed you could make money with online ads until 5 or 6 years ago, and then they realized it was almost too late and they're playing catch up. So I think each company is indicative of their time. A lot of the outsiders could say to Microsoft, hey, you need to do this internet thing that's coming along, but their boat was not sailing in that direction. They had to run into an iceberg until they realized, hey, there's a problem here. Everybody's going this other direction. And luckily they had enough money and enough people that they could sort of steer their boat. But I think the further we get along in internet technology, it's going to be harder and harder for companies to be able to pull U-turns like that. If they're almost any other company, they wouldn't have survived. They just had a lot of money.
And they still have. And what about Google? They get a lot of money now. Microsoft has a lot of money, but maybe a lot of people have not a positive prognosis of Microsoft's being able to turn around in a big way. Yeah. I'm not sure whether you have a development on that.
No, I think some things Microsoft does, they do very well. I mean, their Xbox 360 stuff has come a long way. That's actually been done pretty well. And their live network for networking all those gamers, that's been done very well. I didn't think they could really do that, and they did. So there's hope for them. They can definitely succeed, but I think they have a lot of inertia, and they're tied to a lot of legacy applications, and they have a lot of legacy things for the way they were done in the old days. And I think fixing that is going to take a lot of time and money.
And I think the most interesting turnaround in hard and software industry of the last years of, let's say, a big cruiser that is now going the other direction, I think, is Sun Microsystems. What's your development on Sun and Sun's future?
Well, first let me mention on Microsoft. The one thing that has surprised all the hackers was that Microsoft used to be the example of bad security. I mean, they were the laughing stock, bad security. And everybody joked that they would never be able to turn it around. And so every time they tried to make a security initiative and it didn't really work, well, finally they did. And
when was that?
This is about 4 or 5 years ago. They really started trying. And ever since then, it's no joke now. Now they're considered the leader in security for their projects, for the security development life cycle, for the way they approach problems. And it's, that started 5 years ago, and just now it's starting to be seen in products like Vista. So it's a long time coming. Apple, for example, hasn't made that choice yet on computer security. So they're sort of like where Microsoft was 5 years ago. They're going to have some pretty painful lessons until they turn it around themselves. So you can see there's sort of a lag. So the interesting thing is on Microsoft, which used to be the worst, is now considered one of the best. It took them about 5 years. So I think they can execute if they care about it. They have a target. So on Sun Microsystems, it's funny you bring that up. I mean, in the early days, the internet was run on Sun. I mean, Sun ran pretty much everything. And everybody respected Sun, and everybody wanted to be like Sun, and everybody wanted to run Sun gear and hack into Sun boxes and everything. I mean, that was, nowadays hackers attack Microsoft. But in the old days, you attack Sun because that's what everything ran, Sonos, and then later Solaris with their operating system. And then they had just a really bad decade of nothing went right for them, it seemed like. They were just hemorrhaging money everywhere. But they had successfully made so much money and saved it that they had this big bankroll that allowed them to survive. And I think they've successfully sort of transformed themselves. I guess their storage business is doing quite well for them. And they've come up with new concepts about putting whole data centers in containers that you can ship around or drive.
Project Black Box.
Yeah.
Would be a nice present for Black Hat conference.
Yeah, have a couple of those show up outside. Yeah, so they haven't sold enough to really tell if that's a viable business model, but just that they came up with it and did it shows that they're innovating. And I think that's interesting, that they still can do that.
And for me, I'm coming from let's say, the humanities, and humanities come from language, and language comes from not being plannable until the late 19th century, when the first planned operating systems for the interface of the human place started off. And there were two internet effects, by the way, Volapük and Esperanto, made without any setup box, but just by manuals, you would say in the 20th century. By manuals, people hacked into a planned language, which later, people like Noam Chomsky would say a possible natural language.
Right.
All right, and they had, for instance, Volapük had in 10 years 283 Volapük diploma clubs in the 1880s, but only where it could be downloaded, which means it was a crippled English, so only where English was spoken, so only disseminated in Australia, Europe, and America.
Right.
And then it went down because the guy thought all the derivatives should belong to me, but he had no tool to have interesting communication running, so that actually the community went away. So the second one, called Esperanto, was published under, I would call it, a GPL. Mm-hmm. It was said, as no language belongs to any person, this international new language shouldn't belong to anybody. That's why I give up all the rights forever over it, after so many years of work. So that is, I think, what Sun is doing now. Mm. Yeah, they are freeing not a new language, but a language that was proprietary, Java. They freed it in 2006 after it was already a commodity in terms of technology for the web, for the phone. And all I wanted to say is that the first fork happened in 1907 with the Edo community, which took the Esperanto code to make a different Esperanto, which didn't work, because then there were 2 world wars and it was not a very good runtime environment for these planned languages. But so where I see the technology is that I have, in the medium of natural languages, I have the GPL1, the GPL2, the GPL3. It has to stay in natural languages because the runtime environment of law is the courtroom, which is the theater of, you have to state what really is the case here. Yeah. Okay. So I'm here to monitor whether you lie or not. And for instance, if you see now the techniques of translation of code realities into the legal ones, like for instance, Microsoft was trying to say we can't interoperate with Samba because they are going to see our IP. And our IP is our source code, and that's why we cannot give them protocols. And so they made a big blue bubble on a schema saying this is our IP and interoperability lacks our IP. Then the other side was telling this judge, who is a non-coder, that this is not true. So the blue bubble became a little blue and a little green on the server in the scheme, and then they both burst, and then Microsoft lost. All right? So this is my development on how code realities have to be presented to the public, because this is a far too important layer of our society. It's becoming an important layer to stay in that it's not possible to understand it for people. Right? Now I'm coming back to Sun Microsystems, because they're starting to publish in blogs, in video conferences, what really their politics are, more or less.
The problem with, I think Sun, though, is a little too late. I think. I think we'll see if they can turn it around. I think they got there maybe 5 years too late. So I'm hoping that it works out for them. But they really should have open sourced that stuff and gone there 5 years ago.
2001.
Yeah, I think so.
Actually, now let's see if Sun can, let's say they make the U-turn, but maybe they're too far behind.
Well, because I think too many other technologies came around and people worked around them. When they couldn't license the expensive Java, or for whatever reason, they were trying to stay proprietary, and the internet just kind of moved around them. They were just moving so quickly. And people stopped using the more expensive Sun machines, and they went to these commodity PCs, running Linux or FreeBSD or something that was cheaper. And all of a sudden, the difference between buying their more expensive gear and the cheaper, basically, with the free operating system, the difference kept shrinking. I mean, there wasn't that much more performance, and so the customer base for Sun shrank and shrank. And I think, maybe they're, maybe they reinvent their model, like IBM has reinvented their model into be a services company or a web services company. So if Sun can reinvent themselves that way, then more power to them. I'm just waiting to see.
Thanks, Jeff Moss, for taking so much time. A last question. The interrelation of the, let's say, free knowledge and free knowledge exchange and free coding communities. Would you say that the securities community and the free software community, are they alike in a way? Do they have a good relation to each other?
I think they do. I think because security people they like to see